When I first came into this hobby, when you bought a Rolex, it was unbridled joy. You made an announcement to the world and people surrounded you and congratulated you, and it was all great. About a year and a half ago, perhaps, I started to notice a turn, and that people were less enthusiastic about their purchases, that there was a little bit more pushback in the comments. And then probably about 6 months ago, I began to notice that people were almost doing a preemptive shrug themselves, saying, I bought this Rolex and it's great, but I know it's just a Rolex. And then this week, I saw 2 videos and a long form article in Worn and Wound, almost pleading for non-Rolex people to take Rolex buyers as serious watch enthusiasts. Something's changing. Yeah, so as I said, this week I saw 3 bits of media talking about being a Rolex collector and almost apologizing for it, needing to explain themselves, needing to justify their decision. Watch Gringa did a bit, she was talking about unpopular opinions, and she kind of shamefacedly said, she kind of likes Rolex. I can't remember the exact order or the timestamps, but almost on top of each other. You had Jenny L doing an extended 20-minute video trying to mount a case for why Rolex collectors should be taken seriously as authentic watch collectors. And then, as I said, Blake Bettner wrote a longer article about, in defense of basic watches, how a basic watch can still be a good watch, and that the fact that they have become popular and hyped shouldn't detract from the people that buy them. And the content of the videos and the content of the article were interesting, but I think what was even more interesting is what they meant. Why did these videos have to be made? Why is there suddenly a defensiveness around the idea that you have just bought what we are told is the powerhouse of the watchmaking community? Okay, so the first point I want to make is Rolex watches are great. Rolex watches are really excellent quality. Rolex, the brand, has a fantastic history, and it totally deserves a place amongst the very top, perhaps at the very top of the kind of watchmaking hierarchy. They're not a brand for me. I have no intention of buying one. I have no desire to buy one, but that doesn't mean I have to shit on the brand and pretend it isn't as good as it is, or pretend the watches aren't as good as they are. That's just being intellectually and emotionally dishonest. You are able to say, this is really good, I just don't want it. And that's what I'm saying about Rolex. The second thing I'd need to say right now is, if you are one of those people who is jumping on Instagram or jumping on YouTube or jumping on whatever Facebook or WatchCrunch or whatever forum you're using, and you're shitting on someone because they just bought a Rolex, can you please stop? Sharing with the community that you've just bought a watch is not an invitation for personal or watch critique. Maybe they did ask for a critique, in which case go for your life. But in general, people are just trying to share something that makes them happy. And you coming in and keeping it real by shitting on them is not keeping it real. It's just being a dick. So can people please just stop doing that? If someone's bought a watch you don't like or you don't care about, and they haven't asked you specifically to make some comments, then just don't. Because they're not the toxic ones now. They're not the ones ruining the hobby. You are. But my third point in the longer one is, where is this going to take us? Where is the logical conclusion of the watch community kind of turning away from the idea that, and what's going to happen if we turn away from the idea that Everyone buys a Rolex. A Rolex is a default good watch that we would all buy, and instead it becomes something else. It becomes actually a guilty pleasure. The example that's leaping off the page at me now when I think about where the future of Rolex might be in the watch enthusiast community, and probably in the wider world, is big, oversized 44mm and above watches. Bear with me. The watch enthusiast community is currently all crying out for smaller and smaller watches. You know, 40 is the new 44, 38 to 36 is the new 40. I've seriously seen people talking about thinking that they could potentially rock a 34mm. For someone like me who really loves their normal sized watches, 42, 44mm, I'm really not enjoying the move to the smaller sizes. And from my perspective, what I see there is actually just a lot of fashion within the watch enthusiast community to separate themselves from the masses. The great unwashed masses that are buying watches in malls are still buying 42, 44, 46mm watches. Then we, the cognoscenti, are going to mark ourselves out by buying smaller ones. We're going to buy 36, 38, 39, 40mm watches. That's how you can tell we're better than them. But here's the rub. Most people and most money is still going into bigger watches. That's still where the big money is. That's where the big companies are making all their big profits. Is that where Rolex could end up in 10 years' time? Because remember what's happening right now. New people come into this hobby every single day. We're full of people now that have come in post-Hodinkee, post-Instagram, during a time when if you put a picture up of a Rolex, you got a hearty clap on the back and a big pat on the head. But people coming into the hobby now, if you entered the hobby this week, you would have been confronted with videos talking about how Rolexes are unachievable, how they're bought by people who don't understand watches. You see these defensive videos of people protecting, their reputation for owning watches. And if you were coming into the hobby today, and those are the videos you saw 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, are you being set up to be a natural Rolex owner, or is that going to be something else? Is that going to be, are you going to want to go somewhere else? And then what's going to happen is if those people do go somewhere else, or at least don't go to Rolex in the numbers that they do, you get this snowballing effect. Because remember, desire is mimetic. As more people want different things, then more people are going to want those things that more people wanted. So the exact same function that took everyone towards Rolex in the enthusiast community will begin to take people away from Rolex in the enthusiast community. So in the 2030s, it could be that Rolex watches look a little bit like trying to buy a 44mm dive watch now. That is, you're a kind of outsider. You're kind of passé. Inside the watch community, you're nothing special. That's not going to change anything. By the way, don't start saying I'm predicting a crash of Rolex. Remember what I said earlier. The vast bulk of people out there that are buying watches couldn't care less what we enthusiasts think. We enthusiasts have stopped buying larger watches. We're moving towards small watches. Doesn't matter outside. They're still going hard on buying big watches. The same could happen with Rolex. We might tail off, we might stop buying Rolex watches, or at least Rolex watches in the numbers that we do. But outside, the great unwashed, all of those people who are just ordering their one Rolex a month to come from their grey market dealer to stock their safes, they're going to keep doing it. All of those people who just want to get that Rolex so they can show everyone they got a Rolex, they're going to keep doing it. They don't care what we think. Is that a future? Could that happen? Can you imagine a world where in 10 years' time, people look at Rolex in the same way as they look at Breitling now as a kind of gauche consumer for the other people kind of brand. I don't know. Would Rolex care? Probably not, because I think they'd be thinking if that fell apart, that would be a storm that they could weather and that they would probably continue to survive. Because remember, that's all Rolex want to do. They just want to survive. It's kind of their superpower. Not trying to win makes them win. So I'm going to wrap this up right now, but look, I want to go back and just repeat the first 2 points I made, because I want this to be absolutely clear. Rolex watches are perfectly good. They are really well made. They come with excellent specifications. And at MSRP, they're actually very good value. So don't keep running around saying that they're overpriced and blah, blah. They're not. The secondary market is insane, but that doesn't say anything about the watches. Secondly, unless someone asks you to, whether it's a Rolex or an Invicta, don't shit on people's social media posts about their new watch unless they've asked for it. You're not keeping it real. You're not being honest. You're not speaking the truth. You're just being a dick. So just stop doing it. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.